what he liked so much and what we all liked so much about To Catch a Thief it was a typical Hitchcock movie. It had everything in it.
I think To Catch a Thief is one of the rare films of my grandfather's where so many of his popular themes from other movies are all brought into one. You have Grace Kelly as the cool blonde. You have Cary Grant as the innocent man who is wronged. You have the conversations over food.
Oh, it's wonderful. And the pastry is as light as air.
You have the subtleties, you have the glamour, and you have the mother.
His name is Roby, and for my money, he's a real man. Not one of those milksops you generally take up with.
The mother that is meddlesome to a point, but also charming at the same time.
Mr. Burns, I asked you a question.
It had suspense, it had a love story, it had great stars, and I don't think there's anything, that it lacked.
The title To Catch a Thief comes from the axiom, set a thief to catch a thief, which here is really given a double meaning. It's really something of the pretext for the film, or in Hitchcock's case, what we would call the MacGuffin, because we're really not all that concerned with catching the actual cat burglar. What we're concerned with is watching and waiting to see how Cary Grant is going to be caught by Grace Kelly, because she is trying to attract him, trying to lure him in, and trying to get him to seduce her. But all the while, she's seducing him.
You sent for me?
Yes, I thought we might go for a swim. Or if you're not athletic, sunbathing.
I think I can manage to stay afloat, thank you.
In 1950, Alfred Hitchcock bought the rights to David Dodge's novel To Catch a Thief. He initially bought it to make for Transatlantic Pictures, which was the company that he formed with Sidney Bernstein in the 1940s. But later, when he went to Paramount and had made Rear Window, he decided to bring To Catch a Thief to Paramount and make it there, where John Michael Hayes had already written the screenplay for Rear Window for him. Now, John Michael Hayes was absolutely wonderful at writing comedy, and that's why Hitchcock thought he would be perfect for To Catch a Thief. John Michael Hayes always said that plotting was not his greatest talent, but dialogue was. And this really came out of his early career writing for the radio. And this was what drew Alfred Hitchcock to him, was this bright, quick, crisp style of dialogue that John Michael Hayes possessed.
All evening long, you only looked at my mother, never at me.
I kissed you, didn't I?
I kissed you.
Certainly wasn't looking at your mother then.
You were thinking about her. Otherwise, you never would have let me say goodnight so easily.
To Catch a Thief was written in 1954, and at the time, scripts had to be submitted by the studio upon their completion to the Production Code Administration, known as the PCA. At the time To Catch a Thief was made, Joseph Breen was in charge of the PCA. And when the screenplay was submitted for approval, he immediately objected to all the sexual innuendo that was going on between Cary Grant's and Grace Kelly's character.
I have a feeling that tonight you're going to see one of the Riviera's most fascinating sights. I was talking about the fireworks.
Another thing that Joe Breen cautioned about was any of the scenes on the beach, they would have to be very careful not to show any bikinis. Joseph Breen was also very concerned about what was referred to as the chip gag, which is where Cary Grant meets Grace Kelly by first dropping a casino chip down the front of a woman's dress. Breen was absolutely concerned over whether they would emphasize the woman's cleavage too much, and so he cautioned against that, but he also cautioned against the suggestion that Cary Grant might look like he is poised to retrieve the chip from the woman's dress. So this was a no-no, and they were quickly warned about that.
How much of a list do you need?
Only the top half dozen names.
Anything else?
Oh, the addresses, habits, whatever you've got. Descriptions of the stones and settings.
One of the disappointments about the screenplay was John Michael Hayes had written this wonderful sequence that Hitchcock had designed, which was a chase, which was going to conclude at the end of the Nice flower market scene, where Cary Grant would come to the street and there would be a carnival procession going on, and Cary Grant would jump onto one of these floats. And Cary Grant was going to hide inside this enormous head of King Neptune while the police were chasing after him. As a result of being inside this enormous head, the float begins to go out of control, and there's all kinds of pandemonium until the float is finally wrecked. And it was going to be an additional $30,000 to the budget just to shoot this sequence, and Hitchcock just decided to drop it.
When my father decided to make To Catch a Thief, he had already made Dial M for Murder with Grace Kelly. That was their first picture together. And then they had done Rear Window. So they knew each other, and they knew how each other worked, and it was altogether a very happy reunion.
Grace Kelly had such a persona of a very elegant woman, and so I think For her to become the, quote, Princess of Monaco, no one would have been surprised because she was able to carry off that sort of image in her films. Grace Kelly was probably my grandfather's all-time favorite actress as well as person. He and my grandmother both adored her for her career and just who she was. And when she met Prince Rainier after To Catch a Thief and pretty much never worked again in the movies, I think it was a loss to him, and I think it was a loss to the public.
To Catch a Thief was sad in one way is that it was his last movie with Grace Kelly. He had found a script called Marnie, which Grace loved.
She really wanted to do it, but she had to turn it down. And she wrote to my grandfather, telling him how sorry she was that she could not make Marnie, how she really wanted to do it, but that her first responsibility was to her family and to her adopted country.
May I ask you a personal question?
I've been hoping you would.
What do you expect to get out of being so nice to me?
Probably a lot more than you're willing to offer.
I know.
My memories of Cary Grant, he's one of the kindest, sweetest people I'd ever known. He was always very sweet to me from the time I think I knew him, probably from when I was 12 on up. And he had a great sense of humor, and he and my father got along very well. And he was just a very warm, wonderful person.
When my grandfather was casting To Catch a Thief, the only one that he wanted for the role was Cary Grant. But Cary Grant was at a time in his career where he really did not want to make any more pictures. So when my grandfather approached him on it, he turned him down, but then after persuasion decided that it was something that he just could not give up, that it was something he wanted to do. He was with one of his favorite directors. He was going to be with one of his favorite leading ladies. So it was a situation which it was win for everyone. And after To Catch a Thief, it was such a great experience for everyone that Cary Grant did continue on making films, including North by Northwest.
Just a minute, Mr. Burns. Weren't we going to...
When we what? Going to what?
Well, last night we discussed going up. Up.
In Catch a Thief, he was working with actors he had worked with before, which he liked. He didn't like working with new people. John Williams he had used in Dial M for Murder, and he was also in the Paradine case.
Francie must have known about you all along.
She guessed today. You must sleep soundly.
I do.
Hitchcock also enjoyed working with Jessie Royce Landis. She turns in a wonderfully comedic performance as Mrs. Stevens in To Catch a Thief, and he would cast her again to play Cary Grant's mother the next time in North by Northwest.
Well, what a wonderful surprise.
Somehow I can't get worked up over it.
I think my grandfather's feelings about the word family go beyond just his personal life into his professional life. On this particular film, To Catch a Thief, the theme of family was just as strong as it always was for my grandfather. He had the same crew that he always had working with him in the south of France on their location shooting. My grandmother was with him. My mom, unfortunately, was not because she was expecting my younger sister at the time. But he had Cary Grant, who he admired and very much loved, and the same for Grace Kelly. So it was just one of those situations that I think he really was happy in.